Welcome to the Asp.Net Monsters. This is episode number 2, Production Code HL. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about using static files. Asp.Net MVC6 is interesting in that a lot of the functionality that you'd expect to exist right out of the box in previous Asp.NETs is kind of turned off by default. And one of the things that is turned off by default is serving out static files. So these would be files like your CSS, your JavaScript, any images that you have on your website. All of that is disabled by default. So where it's actually enabled is over here in startup.cs. So if you watched episode 1, you saw us briefly run through everything that's in this startup.cs file. So we're going to take a look at inside the configure method. So if you remember, this is what sets up the application pipeline. So we had a bunch of stuff in here.
Yeah, all of the middleware basically comes in here.
Yeah, that's right. So middleware is kind of this little bit nebulous term in my mind that basically means anything between sort of the web server itself and your application, maybe even the port itself and your application. So it'll do different things like you could set up your routing in middleware, or you could set up perhaps static file serving in middleware, as we're going to do in this example here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off right here, and I'm going to actually comment out this using static files here, and I'm going to respin this up here. I think I have this open somewhere. So this is what the page normally looks like here. So if we could refresh this and we turn static files off, hopefully everything is recompiling in the background nicely for me. Then we should see a little bit of a difference. Assuming that something is in fact recompiling in the background.
It's definitely doing something.
Well, we're waiting for localhost. It's definitely what we're doing. Okay, well, I will assume that will eventually get around to working. So let's hop back over here and take a look at static files. So there are a couple of different features that we can have here around static files. So we can just serve out static files, and typically these are served from the www root directory here. So in here already you can see we have a bunch of CSS files set up, we have a bunch of image files, JavaScript, and some additional JavaScript like third-party JavaScript here in the lib directory. So all of these things here are static files that are going to be served out as part of this project. If you feel like you don't like the term www root, perhaps you want to call it web root or something like that, then you can certainly rename it. And in this using static files bit here, we can actually go in and change the options here and tell it where to serve these static files from. So we can change the directory structure to be anything that we're interested in. And this just follows our kind of standard pattern that we've seen before. We pass in like an options object here. So
get the little options lambda, and then
yeah, that's right.
Build off out that object. And
right. So in addition to being able to just serve out static files, there is some additional functionality that you can do here. So one of the things that you can put in is you can serve out all of the files in a directory. So you can do like directory listing. I'm not a super big fan of doing this. I can't think of a single application of when you would do this necessarily.
We actually took that route when we were publishing assets, artifacts of an image processing process that actually ended up just being dumped into a directory, and the client that we were doing that for actually found that was just as easy to pull it down like that. They didn't want to go through the process of learning FTP, and we didn't want to go through the process of creating a bunch of CRUD for displaying that. So we've used directory browsing for that before.
Okay, so that's you can set this up here, use directory browser. So that's just going to set it up so that if you go to some directory on this machine that contains files, or some directory in your project that contains files, whereas normally you'd get a 404 error that you weren't allowed to list the directory contents, now you'll get a somewhat friendly page to show you about that. See if things actually done loading. No, I must have accidentally reset it at some point here. So let's start this up again here. So now you can see, because I've turned on this directory browsing here, now instead of getting like the default file served out, I'm going to get a bunch of directory content served out here. So I can go into CSS and images and so forth and get that information out of there. So
You
just
can
by,
of course use the options to overload which paths are accessible from the
absolutely.
directory
So
browser and stuff.
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just use it like this because this is gonna clobber stuff for me. I think probably if I put these in the reverse order of the way they are right now, it will work a little bit more like what we're expecting. Let's try doing that.
Now, it's important to point this out because that, like you're saying, the order of the middleware configuration here is actually important as well for the pipeline.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I'm wrong about that. I was hoping that it would work kind of the opposite way, but obviously that directory
You'd have to
browsing.
put it after your routes, after your use MVC.
Oh, okay. Let's give that a try.
So right now it's intercepting your default routes.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So let's try that again.
And the other thing probably too worth pointing out is that when, the first time I tripped across this in the new bits here was when I tried to serve a static file after I had done a file new project with the empty template, right? So you'll actually have to go and configure the use static files as part of, if you're starting right from the net zero, you're not using that default project template where it's got all that cruft in there for you.
Right, yeah, so that's something that you have to remember to put in there. So you can see in this case here, we're getting everything served out properly according to the routing, and then if we go to a directory like CSS, we do get the individual files served out there. And then let me show what this looks like without that enabled, just turning static files off. Which is what I was trying to do at the beginning here and failed to do. But
and now you're getting the spinning.
Yeah, so probably I'm getting a lot of this stuff here just served up out of my cache. So if I kind of do a cache-less reload here, you can see that all of the style is gone, all of the images are gone, and it's generally not a very happy looking website.
Definitely something I've tripped up on in MVC6. So this is what the team is sometimes called, the Asp.Net team is sometimes called the pay-as-you-go model, right? Where you can turn these features on and off and only use the features that you actually want to use.
Yeah, so if you are perhaps serving all of your static content from a CDN, then you could very happily go ahead and turn this stuff off and just serve all of your content from a CDN, all your static content. And I would assume your app would be slightly quicker to run if it didn't have this static file stuff in it. I can't imagine it would be much quicker, but a little bit quicker. So that's pretty much it for serving out static files.
In a nutshell. Dave, has anyone won the contest yet that you know of?
Not yet.
All right, okay. So we're 2 episodes in and nobody's won the contest yet. Keep
No
trying.
Winners.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll see everybody on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.